So it's time for work again. Here on the farm, work never really ends. Well, today I'm going to be clearing some of our trails out. Every so often you need to trim the sides of the trails so you can walk more easily through them. We also have storms that come through and you get deadfalls on the trails, branches falling out of the trees, trees growing in from the sides. Anyhow, today I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the trimming type stuff we have to do to keep our walking trails open. First, a little word about tools. Here I've got a little flip out pruning saw that's good for trimming small branches off of trees or twigs or other things that get in the way of the trails. So that with the larger teeth, that can cut through branches quite quickly. Folds up, can go in your pocket. I also have a more typical pruning shear, which just provides a cleaner cut and is useful for small twigs and branches that are in the way. For the larger stuff that I'll be dealing with today, I've got mainly two tools. I got a pair of loppers. These are quite old and need to be replaced, but they still work to some degree. So these are for trimming larger branches or small trees that are growing too close to the side of the trail, and they can cut things up to 1/2, 3/4 of an inch thick. Then the other major tool is a bow saw. This is a large bow saw. I actually wanted my medium-sized saw, but I couldn't find it. So I'll be taking this one today just to deal with some of the smaller logs that have fallen across the trail. So this is the main entrance to our north woods from the pit, and as you can see along the trail, this birch here, some of its branches are growing out into the trail, mainly the outer twig portion. So what I'm going to do is take these these little pruning shears and just lop off the ends of these branches to trim them back a bit, just like that. And as long as they still have greenery on the rest of the branch, they will continue to live and produce leaves, and the branch itself won't die off. So you can see here I'm just taking these outer sections, just trimming them back a bit so they're not hanging out into our heads as we go by. And I don't have to worry here about a few scraps of twigs on the ground. They'll rot into the ground and not be an issue. So there, just with a few snips, you can see now how this trail has cleared out. Same issue here with this white pine now. I could go back and take the whole branch off, but for now I'm just gonna trim the ends off a little bit, because it's not really interfering too much. This one's okay. My main goal when I do this is to simply keep branches and small trees from coming in from the edge of the trail, preventing you from easily walking down it. I don't want to do any major clearing. You can see this is a fairly wide trail because originally this was made for logging. The people that used to own this logged here a little bit, so they had a tractor that they were pulling logs out of here. That's why it's like 6 feet wide in places. Further along, the trails become narrower and just like human walking trails. So here's one of our recent deadfalls. They just fall over in the wind when the trees die. Now we can continue to just hop over this. It's not a big deal, but we've got quite a few down now on the trails, so I'm going to try and clear some of them up. If these are short across the trail, sometimes you can just grab one end and pull it off the trail, but this one's long and it's stretching across the trail and over the trail for 10 feet in each direction. So I'm going to saw it off. Now, when a log is suspended like this from one end to the other, as you cut through it, it's going to bend downwards. The two pieces will bind together and they'll bind your saw blade. So once I get down in here a ways, I have to find a way to prop this up. Now, because this is fairly small, I might be able to just hold it up with my hand. But if you don't do that, the saw blade will bind in between the two halves, and it's very hard to get out. That'll start happening. That'll start happening when I'm about halfway through or more. Halfway now. So now what I'm going to do is just put a bit of upward pressure so it doesn't bind. And there you go. What I'm going to do now is just tow this thing off to one side here. And there's a few scraps that you usually have to clean up. So there you have it. Just a minute or so sawing. I've got this one free so it can stay in there. It's off the trail. Head on to our next job here. I just noticed before I left this spot, I see a young tree coming in here, and it's going to arch over the trail and just start hanging. They often don't grow well anyhow in the deep shade, so I'll just trim this one out. Now that won't be a future issue in the near future. Now as I come up here, you'll notice a large tree laying across the trail. This is a large hemlock that fell a number of years ago, and I left it basically because it's quite large, 1.5 feet in diameter and heavy, and didn't really want to get involved. I've got a small chainsaw. I could have done it, and I still may, but I don't mind walking over a few things. But as you can see back here, we've got quite a few trees across the trail here that are getting sort of annoying, so I'm going to cut these out. Now these are ironwood, so they're going to be hard to cut, or harder to cut. They're about 5 to 6 inches in diameter, most of them, but I'm just going to do a single cut, and hopefully I can swing the pieces off the trail with a single cut. Now I can feel that starting to bind again. So again, because it's fairly small, I can probably get in and just hold it up a bit. But when they get big, you can't do that. Even this one's a bit tricky. Good old ironwood. Heavy and hard. See if I can cut through it this way. Now, come on. There we go. So I just swung that log over here for the time being. You can see, even though it's starting to rot on the outside, the inside is still fine, solid as a rock. So I should come out and get these for firewood. Just cut through this one. I'll move it off to the side here. Now you, buddy. So yeah, I'll just cut here, and then I'll swing this piece off the trail. This part over here is already off the trail. Just swing this off for the temporary time until I come back and saw them up into firewood. I haven't been working my arms out much lately, so I can feel it very quickly. So what you typically do then to prevent binding of the log you're cutting is you'll find a small chunk of a log, cut it off. I did just cut a chunk off the last log I cut. And then you put it under one side. That has a tendency, because you're raising this side up, that side will then fall on that end, opening up the gap here, and it won't bind. So now I should have clear ability to cut through here, whereas before it was binding. And see, there you go, I'm done. No more binding. And that works for chainsaws or bow saws, whatever saw you're cutting with. So now, just gonna take this chunk off here, throw it over here. That side can stay because it's off the trail. And I'll take my little piece up with me. So this thin little hemlock log is quite rotten, so it's cutting through easily. Pull it off. And this side is okay, really. It's not on the trail. And now up here we got a whole pile of ironwoods that have fallen down. This one was rotting over at the side, so I could just pull it off and just take it over here. This one I might have to cut twice because the left end is actually under another log, and I'm not sure I'll be able to just pull it out of there, so I'll cut it here and maybe have to cut it over there too. I'm in luck. This part on the left I could just break off up at the base. Now I can just bring it over here, and this piece I can just pull off a little bit more than it is. Okay, now this one, being a larger log, 7 inches across here and 6 or so up here, and you can see it goes back to the roots over here. I'm going to cut it just up here off the trail, and I'm hoping I'll be able to swing this whole big piece back off the trail that way. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to because they do get heavy, these things, but I'll try that so I don't have to do 2 cuts. Now, because the upper end of this tree is being held up by this branch, creating a magnified binding effect down here, even though I have my little log under it, I'm going to cut off this lower branch because it's the one suspending it from the ground. May have to get that one too, but I'll suspend this one. I'll cut this one off, and I'll cut it from the bottom, because if I cut it from the top, not that I have room for the saw there, but if I cut it from the top, it would bind. So I cut it from the bottom, and then the tendency is for the crack to open because of the downward pressure of the weight of the log. So hopefully I can get through it this way. Not a lot of draw room, so not very efficient stroke, but I'm getting through it. Now it's binding a little bit on me, but now I just go like this, and then I can probably do the rest on the top. Yeah, so that got rid of that one, which was holding it up. I think this one's doing the same. So in order to remove the upward pressure, I'm going to get rid of this one too. So I got that little branch trimmed off the end there, and the other branches. Now I'm just going to take this section off this one just to make it easier to drag. Like that. Now, see if I can drag this honker out of here, and that's probably debatable. It's heavy. Oh God, it's heavy. I'll probably give myself another hernia. Here we go though. There we go. So I think you can see we've gotten rid of a lot of it. I managed to drag a couple other pieces off to the side without cutting them, that once I got the over layers off. Now there's just these 2 trunks. This big one here that straggles over there across, so I'll probably cut it up there where it's up in the air. Then by then I might be able to drag the other one off without cutting it, depending how rotting it is. So I got my little log under here to raise it up. to hopefully prevent the binding, although this side is already raised up a bit from the other top part of it. Ah, I got it. So now, the question is, can I drag this piece off without cutting it? Oh yeah, no problem at all. No problem at all. And this piece is already largely off the trail. I can just move it over a bit more. And then it's this piece. What resistance are you going to put up, buddy? Oh, geez, this one's hard. So there's that chunk cut through. Now hopefully I can just carry it off, and I think I can. Yes, I can. So there we are. There we are. Go back to where I started. You can see now the trail is clear compared to having about 8 logs lying on it. Use the loppers to trim these 2 little maples out. They're in a deep shade area where they don't want to be anyhow. That's why they're arching up over here, but they probably won't become really great trees at all because of their arching habit, and they're just going to keep arching and falling down over the trail. So get them out now, and then you won't have them hitting you in the head when you come through here. Might as well check my trail camera while I'm out here. Right there, can you see me walking along on the trail camera? I don't think there's anything very new on here, so just gonna shut it down and start it again. Now the trail gets narrow here. It really is just a human walking trail or an animal trail, and that's fine. We don't want a big trail for cars and trucks. So the goal again is just to keep branches and twigs from infiltrating the side of the trail. There's a few areas here where we do allow small shrubs and things to get really tight to the trail, and eventually they may have to be cleared out, but right now is just to get the real stuff that's sticking in your head as you go by and knocking into your sides as you go by. Here's a log, a red pine log. I may see if I can drag it off. Yeah, this one was half rotting, so I just pulled on it and it broke. Now I just have to tow this piece off to that side. I'll just come over here, grab the end of it. Grab the end of it and pull it off. Pull it off the trail. There you go. Wasn't a huge obstruction, but more of an annoyance. Now we got a clear trail there, and I know there's a lot more of those along here, and I'm probably not going to take them all off. Now here's an example of a little shrub, prickly ash. It can get taller, up to 8 feet, and it has tons of thorns, and it's growing along this trail. So easiest to clip them out when they're young. These are just herbaceous plants. They're not going to get in the way of anything. A couple little saplings that are just coming into the trail here. And in a couple of years or so, they'd be really into it. Trim this maple a little bit here. Here's a bigger rotten red pine, and I think I'm just going to leave it here and let it do its course. I don't mind stepping over a few of these along the way. And it would be a hassle to cut through this right now. I'm gonna see if I tug on this log from the narrow end, whether it may crack in half, and then I can just pull it off, or pull part of it off anyhow. Yeah, it did. It did. Oh, thing's good and rotten. Oh, this is good. Now, will you break down here anywhere? Yep, it is. think. Bend it around that tree. Over here. There we go. Snap. That way you don't have to cut anything. But now, one less thing to hop over. Yeah, so a lot of these little seedling prickly ash are growing right on the trail or right next to it. So in a few years they'd be several feet high and jabbing you in the legs with their spines every time you walk by them. So it's best to get them out now if you can. Now, if I was walking this really frequently, just the walking would keep them down. And we walk it fairly frequently, but not enough to trample all this stuff. It's usually just one or two of us at the most. Now here's a case where a couple maples just have their lower branches overarching the trail right at about my head height. So they're getting a bit annoying now, and they'll only get worse as they get older because they'll get longer and heavier and drag further down. So I'm just going to cut these little branches off the trees. The trees are off far enough to not worry about just these branches. So here I use the pruning shears, and what you want to do if you're cutting a branch off is cut right up to the node, or where the thickening of the trunk is. You don't want to go into the trunk, but just here. Anyhow, so that's that branch. And here's this branch. And I think I'll do one more on this maple. Stick her a couple more here. Now the reason you want to cut it here close is so you don't want to cut it out too far and leave a chunk of dead branch on, because it'll rot and then it could rot into the tree. Let's do a little bit more trimming here. There, now it's a much less obstructed walkway. As you can remember, before it was hanging into my head, now it's clear. Here's another big log I'm going to leave just because of the size of it, and it's again not too bad of an annoyance. But I'm going to trim off this ash branch here just because it's getting into the trail. And this little maple too, perhaps, just to keep the trail sides clear. Now here you'll notice there's some herbaceous plant growth, non-woody, so these are asters. And you could come in here with a whippersnipper or a handheld weed whacker, whatever, and clear these out if you want to. I'm not worrying about them. It's more the woody stuff, like this prickly ash again down here, sticking in. Get rid of that prickly ash. That's the real annoying stuff. And this little maple that's coming in here. I'll just take part of this branch off, because as long as I leave some with leaves, the branch will continue to grow and be healthy. You just don't want to cut the branch off and leave no leaves sticking out for quite a ways, because then the branch will rot. Here's a little ash coming in, but I'll leave it for now. For some reason there's a bunch of ash out here, and we don't have a lot of ash elsewhere on the property. And they've been hit so hard in eastern Ontario with the emerald ash borer, wherein a lot of them have died all across eastern Ontario. I'm going to leave these and just see how they do, because it would be nice to have some more ash establish itself here. Here's another big log I'm not going to worry about right now. Oh, a wood frog. Little wood frog hopping through. Yeah, so these two were rotted, and they cut through very easily. So I got that one out really easy. And this larger piece, I just cut it once, and as I pulled on it, oh no, I did cut it twice, that's right. Then it can just go over here for now. So that wasn't too hard. A lot of the hardship with these jobs comes just in thinking about doing them. Once you actually get out and do them, I mean, this is a fair amount of work. I'm getting sweated up pretty good. It's very humid out today. But once you actually get out and do them, like so oftentimes in life, the job doesn't seem as bad as the thought of the job. Now here's an example of one of our fallen beech trees that are dying because of the beech bark disease. This one across the trail here is probably 10 inches in diameter. It's broken off from the base over here, and it's still hung up there. Then the end goes well off the trail. So you can see here, as soon as you would start to cut here, the log would collapse this way and bind the saw. Now I'm not going to try this with the bow saw. This needs a chainsaw. And what you would do, what I would do probably, is I'd bring the chainsaw off the trail here, and then or I might do it over at that end first because it's smaller. But anyhow, I would cut up from the bottom, cut up probably close to halfway. And then when you cut down through the top and meet the other cut, it'll crack open and it won't bind the saw. Now there may be some benefit to actually cutting this off first, but I'm not sure. That could be a bit dicey. I don't think so. I think if you brought a chainsaw and started hacking away underneath here, that would release fairly quickly, but this is under such tension, I think I'd prefer to stay away from that. And actually, the more I think of it, I probably would start over here where the tree is smaller in diameter, cut up from the bottom, cut down, so that would release this to fall, and just the falling might release it from the other end. I'm not sure, but once you got that down, then you could come over here, and depending whether this has fallen or not, if it hasn't fallen, you could continue to cut here and cut it through and get it off the trail. Or if it has fallen, then you might be able to just cut through straight because it would no longer be hung up on anything. Nice little barred owl sitting over in the trees over there. I don't know if you can see between these beech trees in the background and the hemlock. You might be able to see a barred owl. He just flew in there. Here's another big dead tree, an aspen or something that fell a little while ago, and it's just the size that I haven't gotten to it because I would need the chainsaw. Not that that's a big deal, but just haven't done it yet, and it's rotting pretty quick now. Now this one I might be able to get off of here. It's a yellow birch. It's half rotten, or it looks like it is. It's fairly thick, probably 9 or 10 inches, but I'll see if I can either move it first. If I can't move it and crack it, then I'll try sawing through it. Now it was heavy and half rotten up there, and I couldn't really lift it, so I'm going to try sawing through this narrower section here. Let it for a second. Okay, got that one off. Now I'm going to try and swing it around here. There we go. What a mess. So here's a branch. It's just big enough and got enough branches on the one end here that it's hard to pull either way. So I'm just going to cut the branches off at the base here where they meet the trunk. And I can tow them off on their own. Easy to cut this thing anyhow. It's fully rotted and dead. Okay. Over here, this piece can go over here. Now I can drag this more easily. Drag it into here. And I should say this is a good time of the year to do this in the fall, or early spring is a good time too. You don't want to really come out and do this in any major way in the spring, later spring and summer when the birds are nesting, because in a place like this you could have oven birds nesting on the ground. We've got lots of oven birds here in the summer. They build nests on the ground. And you have other birds too that could nest on the ground, woodcocks, other things that you might be affecting the trees overhead. You don't want to be doing this in any major way during the bird nesting season. Now, if you're just trimming a few little twigs off and you can see that there's no nests in them, that's one thing. But to go in and start clearing major trees out of an area, you don't want to do that during the nesting season. Now here, this little maple has been leaning over for some time. It's not going to ever do well, so I'll just cut it off. The prickly ash here. Here's some branches that are starting to hang over and get in my head. Just going to trim them up a bit so they're not doing that. Again, if you did this in the spring or summer, you'd have the chance of knocking nests out of the trees. Little things like vireos and even hummingbirds may have their nests on places like that, and if you're not careful, you could cut them down. So there you have it. We've done one set of trails in what I would call a rough fashion. I've got a lot of the logs that were laying across the trail and bugging me out of there. Left a few of the larger ones still, and I need to get that big beech down at some point with the chainsaw. But as you can see, my shirt is soaked, and it's partly because it's gotten very humid out, but it's a good workout when you start sawing through logs and pulling logs. And anyhow, I've given you a sample of the way I use these various tools to clear the trail and the method I use. Some people may want to expand their trails more fully. I like to keep the walking trails just wide enough to get through without having branches and twigs coming into your hair, or prickly ash or other shrubs coming into your legs. Just wide enough. There may be the odd time when I take it a bit wider just to improve the view or something like that, but anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed this little outing. I'm going to head back and get something to drink.